I am excited to be talking to you about one of my favorite genres.
Oh, great. I love it.
I love a good Western, and boy, oh boy, have you given me a good Western with Old Henry.
Oh, I love hearing that. I really do, because you don't know what the feedback's going to be when you make something. It's like, just to hear, and especially with people that love Westerns, I love hearing it. So thank you.
I didn't know what to expect. I was absorbed immediately. Immediately.
Oh, great.
Very observational with Tim's character of Henry, and of course, and Gavin Lewis as Wyatt, and of course you got Trace Adkins as Al, and right away they're out there in the field, and you see this beautiful landscape that you and John have outdone yourselves visually. This film will put John on a huge platform map for his cinematography, let me tell you.
It's funny because we walked out of the Venice premiere, and we had a little after party gathering, and this is 8 minutes after we walked out, and he gets a text for a job offer. So it was, John and I have been friends for a while. He's the most talented guy I've ever met. I mean, just a fantastic guy, and just so easy to work with. So it was,
The visual tone the two of you create, it is transportive in time and place. It is immersive. We feel the weather-worn years on Henry's house and on Henry. And it feels like just through the tone, the visual tonal bandwidth of what John captures with light and lens, it's like we can feel the weight of days gone by. The gray skies, no sun. You guys just set the mood perfectly. We are there on that land, looking out over that open, wide space with woods in the distance, in that house with the worn wood floors. And these details are so critical to us believing in old Henry and that he had seen better days. And then you give us tiny tidbits before the biggest twist in the world that I didn't see coming.
I'm glad.
POTSY, my God!
It's, you always worry, like, do you give too many hints away, or did you, it's always a worry of when you're doing it, and then the other side of it is that twist going to be, is it going to be cheesy, or is it going to work? And so, I give so much credit to Scott Haze for selling that moment.
Yeah.
Scott is such a talent, and the way his breath and his eyes were kind of watery, and it's just a great moment. And I remember when we first, the first take after he did the scene and said cut, and we were like, I think I looked at John and I was like, oh man, this is gonna work. It was actually gonna work out. So that is such a relief in that moment.
Oh my, I blew my mind, but it also plays right into this. You have this multi-generational, this father-son dynamic happening with Henry and Wyatt, and then a flashback with two other individuals, so that we don't give a spoiler away. But you feel that father-son dynamic, that generational of that days gone by thing. Better days, brighter days, which of course are captured in the flashbacks with a raging fire, the fiery glow, which is a great contrast to the grays that you have in present day, quote unquote, 1906 or 7. Just stunning, but the way that feeds that. Gotta ask you, Potsy, where did this idea even come from? Because there are so many myths about the Old West and about conspiracy theories and things surrounding some of these individuals in particular, that I'm curious, where did you get the spark for this? And what set you on the path to crafting this script?
It's like, when I was younger, this is hard to not give away, but, Young Guns came out at a time I was, just like, I was like, the king of the greatest thing in the world. So that, he's always been my favorite of all the gunslingers. And so, I've gone down a ton of those rabbit holes on him and Jesse James, and did they survive, or did they, did these people that supposedly kill him just let him go? And that was part of the myth, and that's so much more fun to believe in. But the whole story, it actually didn't start with that. It was, I was scouting for a different project, and this property exists like 40 minutes outside of Nashville, and that's where the mountains changed. There's, the big rolling hills, and that red grass is out there, and so I was out there scouting, and it's, it's a 2,500 acre property. So we came over this hill, and I saw the house down in this valley, and, it's this old house on these stone columns, and it was just such a gorgeous house. We just kind of walked around it for a minute, and it started getting dark out. And, I'm not really from the country, so that the country's a little intimidating at night. You get a little scared. So I just kept picturing, like, what if somebody came over the hill? What would I do? And so that the location really spawned the whole story. And then as we partnered with Shot Factory, my company, Hideout, we partnered with Shot Factory and Shot Studios on this. And, it was like, how do you, because the story was called Old Dan, the original script. And so they're like, how do you add a historical figure to this? I'm like, oh, that's easy. Call him Old Henry. But then the problem was that set us kind of out of the period of Old West into 1906, because Henry had to be a certain age.
Sure.
At this point. So then it was like, all right, where could this take place? Because, it had to exist within that timeline, and luckily Oklahoma wasn't a state yet. It was still this kind of half Indian territory, half Oklahoma territory place. So it really just kept evolving and kept evolving. And that's kind of where it landed.
Well, I can easily see why that location would have inspired you and spurred you onward with the ideas for this film, because this location is everything. They talk about location with real estate. Same thing with certain films, and this is certainly one of them. But then you look at this cast. You look at this cast, which is, your core cast is amazing, and I have to tell you that next to his work in The Motel Life, this is without a doubt Stephen Dorff's best film of his career.
Oh, really? Crazy.
He's tailor-made for a role like this.
Yeah, he really is. I mean, his kind of stature and presence with that, his face is just perfect for it, and his voice is that grizzled smoker's, kind of voice, and he really is. Like, he could say nothing, or he could say, the poetic lines that we gave him, but he fits this era really well.
Yeah, I mean, and Tim Blake Nelson is, of course, flawless.
Tim, I consider myself extremely lucky that Tim read the script and liked it, and really put in the amount of time that he did, because he came in, he read it, he asked to do a Zoom call with me. So we met over Zoom, we talked for a couple hours, and then he said, can I go through this with you, and can you work on my character, and can we talk about it, and kind of develop this whole theory into what we think it'll be? And I was like, absolutely, that sounds amazing. Because I love Tim's work, and just the thought of collaborating like that with somebody that's worked with and does the role he's done, it's amazing. So, we spent weeks and weeks and weeks just talking an hour or two every day, reading books and watching, sending movies to each other, and just really getting down to the core of who Henry is and how he speaks and what he looks like. And He was amazing, and we asked him to come on as a executive producer, and he, not for just a title, but because he earned it. Like he put in so much time before, pre-production, on set, and then even in post-production. He just really enjoyed the process. It was such a good time, and we've become great. I mean, I consider him a really good friend because we still talk a couple times a week, whatever. So,
where do you even start with a film like this? I know how closely you work with John, with the cinematography, but then we've got to look at Max Bisco's production design here, because all of these details steep us in this period, steep us in this mindset. How did you storyboard this out, especially with a lot of the shots that you have, and you're working with horses, and you're working with pigs, and you're working with gunfights? I mean, you've got the whole shebang here, Potsy.
Yeah, I mean, and it was a lower budget film, and we had 21 days to shoot it, so we really had to milk a lot, every moment of every day. So, but Max Bisco and Ruby Gadara, who's our art director, those two were irreplaceable in this movie. This house, the front porch of the house is actually on the other side. Mm-hmm. So we needed the porch to face the hill. Mm-hmm. That's where, I just kept picturing people coming over the hill. And so we actually, the owner of the land let us tear down an old barn to build that porch with authentic wood. And
wow.
On the roof, like half of the metal was rusted and half wasn't. So they went up there and painted it. And Ruby and Max spent hours making the wood on the side of the building look like it was half moss covered. Like all of those little elements were them just giving this thing the thickness and detail that that shows up, and it's amazing what they Matysiak and I would come to set every day, my DP, and we just before we started shooting, we'd come to set during pre-production and just walk around and be like, holy, this feels so authentic, and like just amazed at the job they did. So it really was. I mean, everybody was so incredible on this. I think everything just kind of came together and worked, and it was one of those moments where you get a great film.
Working with animals is always a challenge, and here you don't just have one or two horses. You got a whole bunch of horses. You've got pigs. And I have to say that feeding the pigs in that first act is really one of my favorite shots in the entire film. As, the pig organs are being dumped in and they're actually eating. But you're working with all these horses. Horses are even more unpredictable than people. Then you've got that rugged terrain in the forest for the third act chase and shootout. What kind of challenges did this present for you, especially on a low budget film and time is so critical?
Yeah. Well, it did change. The horses were a thing. So the opening scene with Stephen Dorff, and he's dragging the guy behind the horse,
mm-hmm.
that was originally written. I wrote it to be the guy is sitting on a horse and the noose is around his neck, and Stephen Dorff is on his horse, and they're talking to each other from horse to horse, and then, Dorff was going to go behind him and strangle him while he was up on the horse, but just getting the horses to stay put and getting everything, that really kind of adjusted the day before, where it was like, I was kind of looking at the scene and walking through it, and I was like, all right, we're going to spend so much time trying to block these horses, we're going to lose our momentum here, and so that was rearranged the day before just so that, based on, we'd had a couple days experience with these horses, and they're not the easiest to work with. So there was some adjusting throughout. In the final shootout in the woods, that we shot the whole thing, because this was November, December, so our daylight hours, it got dark at 5 o'clock.
Sure.
It was short days, so we had about 3 hours left in our day, and we had one more scene to shoot after the woods scene, so that entire shootout at the end was done in about 2 hours. And if you go into the footage, like, there's no other options that I could have put on that camera. Everything you see is exactly what we shot.
Wow.
In the order we shot it. But luckily it worked, because that was a pretty stressful day, because just running out of time, like we just kind of had to move, and everyone had to trust that what we were getting was it, and it was awesome.
You've got a couple of really key night sequences in there too. I'm curious, were you shooting night for night, or did you do night for day? How did you work that?
So, some of the inside was actually daytime, and we just blacked out the windows, but all the night was night for night.
Wow.
And John Matysiak, he wanted, we both wanted the night to look like there wasn't a source for light, and to let it feel like moonlight and, feel the darkness. But that required condors and lights, and so we had to, in order to get him what he needed for that scene, we had to give up a couple things, like we had to give up a crane day, we had to give up a follow car for the horses and things like that. So, on this budget, there was a lot of give and take to get, we had to kind of prioritize what was important and what we wanted to get on the screen. So, but those night scenes, I mean, those were, it was like 34 degrees and raining and it was freezing. And so those were brutal, but I think that comes across in the scene. Like, it feels harsh and cold, and which I think helps.
Yeah, the weather really, really played to your advantage here. From the overcast skies to the rain, and you can actually see the rain landing on the hats, landing on the shoulders. It is very effective. So it was well worth enduring the November, December weather back there in the mountains, right there at Blue Ridge, the Blue Ridge area. So much of this film is about patience. It's about deliberateness, waiting, being methodical. And that's a fine line to walk in your edit. How challenging was finding the right pacing for you and your editor, Jamie Kirkpatrick?
It was tough because there's a line between an art house film and a commercial film.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I like that somewhere in the middle there. I think that you can have a blend of both, but because if it's too long and too artsy, I think you lose people. And I literally watched a movie where a guy was watching the grass get watered, and
Yep.
And it went on forever. And you're like, okay, I get what they're doing, but I sort of get lost in the too artsy moments, and so I think there was always the intention of let's show the big wides and let's slow down the pacing. Let's let the location be a character and really build tension and have these moments drawn out and let it feel natural and move in its own pace. So the dinner scene with Tim and Scott Haze's character, it's a 4.5-5 minute scene in the middle of the movie that it's just two guys talking. And, there were some of the producers that they asked, are you going to shoot something to cut away to? Is there a flashback or anything? I was like, no, I think it can be an engaging moment between the two of them, and the story should draw you in. But then as I'm reading, I'm like, all right, it needs something else. And that's where, I was like, okay, what if we put because really the kid, I know we can't say this to the public, but this historical figure, he did like to toy with people. And so the thought of him leaving this loaded gun on the table, part of his old self is coming through, and he's enjoying this moment of teasing this guy and taunting him a little bit by leaving that gun and having that tension to break up the scene a little bit. I think was helpful. So.
Oh, I got to tell you, I'm watching that scene and that gun on the table. I was on the edge of my seat, just waiting, wondering, okay, who's going to go for the gun?
Yeah.
Especially after he unties a hand so that, so Curry can eat his stew with instead of Henry feeding it to him.
Yeah.
So you got a free hand, you got a gun on the table, and it's like, oh my God, you had me on the edge of my seat with that scene.
Oh, great. That's great to hear.
I would be remiss not to ask you about the score here. Your score is subtle. It's effective. I really like it. Jordan Lehning, what were your discussions with him like for what you were looking for musically here?
So Jordan is a local Nashville guy. I've worked with him before on Still the King, and he's an amazing musician. And when I approached him about this, he said, this is the kind of movie I got into this business for. I really want to do this. So he was all in from the beginning, and the idea was, how do we do a simple score that's few instruments but will move it? And so he bought an old drum head that was from the 1900s, like the early 1900s.
Mm-hmm.
So all the instruments were instruments that existed at that time. So there was a glass harmonica that he used, which is, when you run your finger around the rim of a wine glass.
Mm-hmm.
It's a similar sound, but there's an instrument called an harmonica, and it's these spinning discs of glass that go through water, and you kind of play it like a piano. So there was some of that, and we really got into every character has sort of a theme where, Henry has a little bit of a piano in his, and Wyatt is a lot more of the harmonica sound, and so it was really great working with him. He's amazingly talented. I think I got so excited because when we were in Venice, we got to walk out to that final score and everything, and it's such a cool moment. So Jordan, he did an amazing job.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you told me about the instrumentation, because the instrumentation is so key. Composers can, as you well know, composers can write a score, but then how is it arranged and how is the instrumentation brought into play? And in something like this, Brian Tyler does it with Yellowstone using authentic instrumentation, and Jordan does it here, and it's so effective, and you don't even realize how powerful it is. And I love what Jordan's done.
Yeah, I really did. It was a fine line of what's too much score, what's too little score. So in some of those action moments, like when Dugan's character goes under the house, we had a score there, and when Jordan and I were watching it, it was like, well, let's pull that out and let's let that moment live in just the noises of the house and not over. So he was incredible in showing restraint, even though he'd already written something for it, like, being able to be okay with no score. And I think that's a huge piece of a great composer, is knowing when is too much or when is too little. So I think he's super talented.
Well, it's the mark of a good director too, when he knows that silence or letting just ambient noise of night take over, because it's amazing how many things you can hear in the middle of the night.
It's loud, yeah, the country's loud.
So one last question for you, Potsy, before I let you go. You've had this great premiere at Venice. The film is getting ready to come out. What did you learn about yourself as a filmmaker that you can now take forward into your next projects?
I think overall, I'd say patience is one thing. Learning that, because when I did the TV show before this, that was so fast paced.
Uh-huh.
We were shooting an episode every 4 days, and we were writing, changing scripts, and just putting it out. And the edits had to be done in a timely fashion. With this movie, it was, let's get the script perfect, let's get the set perfect, let's get, and I know the budget was constrained, but it was picking what's important over, and not, our sets are always very, very calm and very fun, and nobody ever yells, and it's just a relaxing environment, because at its core, we get paid to do the greatest job in the world, which is amazing. It's like, you got to have fun doing it. So I think I learned to be more patient and to let, if things need a little more work, then I think that it goes a long way. So, and I learned that I actually because I thought I'd only make comedies in my life, but I really, really enjoyed this process. So I think there's I enjoyed the drama more than I thought I would.
You definitely gravitate well towards it. Let me tell you, I want to see more drama from you, Potsy, and and historical drama. Revisit the Old West again.
I had a script I loved. It was sent to me, and it was another Western, and the writer did an amazing job, but I think I was, talking to my manager about it, and we said no just because it was another Western right away. I hope the script is there in like 3 years and I go back to it, but I didn't want to get pigeonholed into only doing Westerns, so you got to be so careful with, because people will pigeonhole you pretty quick. So I had to, look for something in a different genre for the next one, but I definitely will go back to a Western.
But whatever you do, Potsy, I can't wait to see it next, and I hope I get to talk to you again.
I appreciate it. Thanks for getting on the phone. This is great.